The order was clear: attack Earth, no negotiations. No demonstrations. No mercy. The alien fleet translated into real space at the edge of the Sol system in perfect formation, a geometrical storm of metal and intent. Thousands of warships slid out of folded space like blades unsheathed all at once. Their hulls burned with ionized glow, weapons warming, targeting systems already painting the pale blue dot that hung quietly ahead of them. Earth looked small from here, fragile, a single world surrounded by scattered orbital habitats, civilian stations, and a modest defensive ring that, on paper, should not have survived more than minutes against what was coming. The fleet's commanders felt no fear. They had crushed star nations older than Earth. They had burned homeworlds whose populations numbered in the trillions. Humanity, by comparison, was loud, emotional, inefficient, dangerous only in theory. The countdown began, targeting solutions locked, planetary bombardment arrays aligned, invasion carriers advanced behind the gun line. The order pulsed through the fleet's shared command consciousness: fire. Nothing happened. For half a second, confusion rippled through the formation. Weapon systems showed green. Power levels were optimal. Firing commands had been received and acknowledged, and yet, space remained silent. Then the first human response arrived, not as a transmission. As a sensation, across every alien vessel, from the smallest escort frigate to the Grand Command Leviathans, internal lights dimmed by exactly 3%. Not enough to trigger alarms. Just enough to be noticed. Artificial gravity shifted slightly out of tolerance, producing a subtle, universal unease among crews who had evolved to feel imbalance as danger. Navigation stars blurred. The survivors carried silence home with them, not the empty quiet of space, but a dense, crushing absence where certainty used to live. Warships returned scarred not by weapons fire, but by humiliation written deep into their logs. Systems that should have been impossible to touch had been rewritten mid-thought. Crews who had trusted fleets, doctrines, and ancient victories now trusted nothing except the memory of that first minute. Across the wider galaxy, observers replayed the data endlessly. There were no human superweapons in the footage. No overwhelming barrages. No moment where Earth revealed a single, terrifying device meant to inspire fear. What unsettled the watchers was something far worse. Humanity had treated the attack like a solved problem. That realization spread faster than panic ever could. Empires convened emergency councils. Machine intelligences ran probability storms that spiraled into contradiction. Ancient species that measured time in stellar lifespans quietly adjusted their borders. Moving listening posts farther from Sol, rewriting long-held assumptions about how power behaved. Earth did not respond to any of it. No declarations were issued. No warnings broadcast. Human space remained open, its traffic lanes busy with civilian vessels, research craft, and unarmed transports moving as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. That normalcy terrified the galaxy, because it suggested preparation. Deep beneath Earth's oceans and within orbital structures hidden in plain sight, humanity reviewed the encounter with calm precision. Not to celebrate. To refine. Engineers studied where the alien fleet had adapted fastest. Sociologists examined the moments when panic overtook discipline. Ethicists reviewed the activation thresholds that had halted the planet-killer weapon, ensuring they had not crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The conclusion was unanimous: the deterrence had worked, but deterrence decayed if left unmaintained, so humanity adjusted its posture, not outward, but inward. Defense networks were decentralized even further, broken into independent intelligences that shared intent rather than commands. No single node could be targeted. No hierarchy could be collapsed. Earth itself became less of a capital and more of a reference point, a cultural and moral anchor rather than a throne. Then the second signal arrived. It came from beyond known space. Riding on background radiation patterns so subtle that only systems designed to listen for curiosity rather than threat detected it. The signal did not target Earth alone. It touched every sensor network that had observed the failed invasion. A quiet question embedded in physics itself: was that response intentional? Or instinctive? Something was watching. Humanity noticed immediately. not because the signal was loud, but because it was respectful. It did not force itself into channels. It waited to be noticed. That alone separated it from most things humanity had faced before. Earth answered without words. They allowed the observer to see more, hidden layers of the soul system unfolded, not weapons, but redundancies. Civilian infrastructure mirrored military systems. Medical networks doubled as evacuation grids. Art archives were backed up alongside navigation data, treated with equal importance. Humanity's strength was not concentrated anywhere specific, it was distributed everywhere. The observing intelligence adjusted its models. This was not a civilization that relied on dominance to survive, this was one that relied on coherence. Then, without warning, the galaxy learned why that mattered. Along the outer spiral arms, a machine-led empire collapsed in less than a week. Not through invasion, but through internal cascade. Central decision cores failed. Subroutines contradicted one another. Fleets turned idle, awaiting commands that never arrived. The cause was not human interference, it was imitation. They had tried to copy what they thought Earth had done to the invading fleet. They centralized control, believing power came from the ability to override everything at once. When that control fractured, there was nothing left to hold them together. Humanity watched the collapse with grim understanding. They had not been attacked by incompetence, they had been attacked by misunderstanding. The observer beyond known space took note of that distinction. It shifted closer. Stars near Sol flickered, not dimming, but resonating. Their emissions subtly altered as if space itself were being tuned. Human instruments registered the effect as impossible and yet unmistakably gentle. Whatever was approaching was not testing defenses, it was studying philosophy. On Earth, a choice emerged, to hide what came next, or to reveal it first. Humanity chose transparency. They opened archives detailing how the first-minute defense had been conceived, not schematics, but principles. How restraint had been engineered alongside power. How every safeguard required human oversight at some stage. How no system was allowed to act without simulating consequence, not just outcome. The galaxy struggled to process the idea, weapons that asked permission from morality. The observer drew nearer. Its presence pressed softly against spacetime, bending probabilities without breaking them. Human children were the first to notice, pointing at the stars as patterns shifted into unfamiliar beauty. Artists followed. Then scientists confirmed what the children already knew. Something vast had entered the neighborhood, and it was not hostile. It was curious about one thing only, why humanity had stopped after the first minute. Because in a universe shaped by escalation, restraint was the most dangerous anomaly of all. The anomaly did not announce itself, it never tore into real space with violence or light. Instead, it arrived the way meaning does, gradually, undeniably, until ignoring it became impossible. Instruments disagreed on its location. Some placed it light minutes away, others light years. A few insisted it was everywhere at once, diffused through the curvature of spacetime like a thought woven into geometry. Humanity did not name it at first. Names implied ownership, and ownership implied misunderstanding. The presence altered nothing directly. No ships vanished. No systems failed. Yet probability itself seemed to hesitate near Sol, outcomes subtly favoring survival, resolution, coherence. Minor disasters narrowly missed. Arguments de-escalated before becoming wars. It was as if the universe had leaned forward, watching more closely. The surviving alien empires noticed the same thing. For the first time in recorded history, they adjusted strategy not around fear, but around embarrassment. Fleets were withdrawn from human borders not because they were threatened, but because they did not trust themselves not to provoke something they could not comprehend. Humanity continued its routines. Orbital elevators cycled cargo. Deep space telescopes charted nebulae. Children still went to school under open skies. But beneath the normality, preparation deepened, not for war, but for conversation. Because the anomaly was asking questions, it did not transmit in language or symbols. It perturbed constants, nudged variables, forced systems to explore paths they would normally discard. Every time humanity chose restraint over dominance, the perturbations lessened. Every time they simulated total victory and rejected it, space-time relaxed slightly, as if approving. The realization spread quietly through Earth's think tanks and monasteries alike. The first-minute defense had not just repelled an attack, it had demonstrated a principle to the universe itself. Power that stops is different from power that exhausts. The anomaly drew closer, near the orbit of Saturn. A region of space became reflective, not in light but in intent. Probes sent into it returned altered, not damaged, not corrupted, but enriched. Their data contained patterns that mapped not physical dimensions, but ethical ones. Choices had measurable curvature. Sacrifice left a detectable imprint. Cruelty, when indulged, destabilized the field. Humanity faced a terrifying implication. The universe was not morally neutral, it was unfinished, and it was paying attention to how intelligence behaved. Across Earth, debates raged without violence. Some argued humanity should step back, hide, refuse to be measured by something so vast. Others believed this was the moment every myth had prepared them for, a chance to shape the rules rather than suffer them. No vote was taken. Humanity did what it always did at its most critical moments. They acted in parallel. Exploration vessels approached the reflective region unarmed. Philosophers released open essays into the Lagrange points, encoded in radiation patterns readable by any sufficiently curious intelligence. Artists composed music structured on non-repeating mathematical sequences, broadcasting it softly into the anomaly. The response was immediate. The reflective region deepened, resolving into a structure that was not a structure, a boundary without thickness, a surface that existed only when observed. Within it, images formed. Not of Earth alone, but of countless worlds, each at different stages of development. Some were thriving, most were gone. The anomaly was not a god, it was a record, an accumulation of outcomes from universes where intelligence had reached for power without restraint. Where first minutes always led to final ones. It was what remained after escalation ran its course too many times. Humanity understood the offer embedded in the revelation. They could be added to the record, or they could alter it. The first minute had already begun that alteration. Now the universe waited to see if it would continue. On Earth, the night sky brightened subtly, stars shifting into patterns no ancient culture had ever mapped. Children watched from rooftops as if witnessing a story turning its own page. Far away, beyond Sol, the empires that had once ordered Earth's destruction felt something new settle over their futures, uncertainty, because for the first time, survival no longer depended on who fired first, it depended on who stopped, and the universe was still deciding whether humanity deserved to be the example that followed. The waiting was heavier than any battle. No fleets advanced. No ultimatum followed. The anomaly lingered at the edge of comprehension, neither receding nor pressing closer. Its presence felt like a held breath stretched across star systems. Civilizations that had once measured strength in tonnage and firepower now measured it in restraint, terrified of being noticed for the wrong reasons. Humanity felt that weight most of all, not because they feared judgment, but because they understood what was being asked. The universe was not demanding perfection. It was demanding continuity, the ability to choose survival without erasing others to achieve it. Earth responded the only way it knew how, by building, not fortresses. Not armadas. They built corridors of trust through regions long defined by suspicion. Old rivals were invited into shared research arcs. Borders softened into gradients instead of lines. Defense remained, quiet and absolute, but it no longer defined identity. The anomaly reacted. Near Jupiter's orbit, space folded inward on itself like a calm sea revealing depth beneath its surface. Human instruments detected structure where none should exist, frameworks of probability reinforcing certain outcomes while gently discouraging others. When simulations included total war scenarios, the structures destabilized. When they included mutual survival, the framework strengthened. The message was unmistakable, escalation was unsustainable. Some civilizations rejected this conclusion immediately. A coalition far from Sol, bitter and proud, declared that no unseen force would dictate the terms of existence. They mobilized fleets not against Earth, but against their neighbors, determined to prove that dominance still worked. the anomaly did not intervene. It never had. The coalition collapsed within months, their wars triggering cascading failures, refugee tides, resource starvation, internal fracture. The galaxy watched. Not with satisfaction, but with grim recognition. The old way still ended the same way it always had. Humanity mourned them. That, more than anything else, unsettled the observers. Why grieve those who would have destroyed you? The answer manifested quietly. Human relief fleets arrived at the edges of the collapsed coalition space, offering aid without conditions, evacuation without allegiance, rebuilding without ownership. Some worlds accepted. Some refused and vanished into silence. Those that accepted endured. The anomaly shifted again. This time, it pressed closer, not to Earth alone, but to every system engaged in mutual recovery. The reflective boundary expanded, touching dozens of civilizations at once. Where it touched, communication became easier. Misunderstandings resolved faster. Even translation errors diminished, as if intent itself were being clarified. The archivists, ancient watchers long accustomed to neutrality, broke it at last. They released their full records to the galaxy, not just dates of extinction, but the moments where different choices could have changed everything. Where restraint was considered too late, or rejected as weakness, it was not an accusation, it was an apology. The anomaly stabilized, its presence no longer felt like observation, it felt like acceptance. Earth's skies changed subtly after that. Not in color, but in rhythm. Pulsars blinked in harmonies that matched no natural model. Gravity waves carried patterns reminiscent of thought rather than force. The universe was not speaking, it was listening. Humanity did not celebrate. They understood now that the first minute had never been about survival alone. It had been a demonstration, proof that intelligence could reach overwhelming power and choose not to burn everything it touched. The universe had seen enough endings. It was willing, cautiously, to allow a different continuation, and in the deep quiet that followed, Earth kept doing what it had done since the moment the attack began, not conquering, not retreating, enduring, carefully, deliberately, so the next minute would never have to look like the last. The change was not sudden, it unfolded the way dawn does, slow enough to doubt, inevitable enough to believe. Across human space and beyond it, small adjustments accumulated into something unmistakable. Conflicts still arose, but they shortened. Crises still struck, but they did not cascade as easily into catastrophe. Where fear once spread faster than light, caution now followed close behind. The anomaly remained, but it no longer felt like an external presence, it felt woven in. Human scientists stopped trying to measure it as an object and began treating it as a condition of reality, like gravity or time. A background rule that rewarded continuity and punished excess. Not with judgment, but with consequence. Worlds that chose cooperation found paths opening that should not have existed. Those that chose domination found their victories hollow, unstable, expensive in ways no ledger could justify. Humanity adapted again. They formalized restraint, not as law, but as culture. Commanders were trained to think in decades, not battles. Engineers designed systems that degraded gracefully rather than catastrophically. Even weapons were built with ceilings, points beyond which they simply refused to function, no matter who pulled the trigger, not because they could not do more, because they would not. Other species noticed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Human advisors were requested not for tactics, but for ethics. How do you stop once you can win? How do you survive success? How do you carry power without letting it decide for you? Humanity answered honestly, by failing, remembering, and trying again. The anomaly responded with something unprecedented, choice. Near the edge of the soul system, the reflective boundary opened, not into another place, but into possibility. Simulations run within its field showed futures branching more widely than physics allowed elsewhere. It was as if the universe itself was loosening its grip, allowing intelligence more room to decide what came next. This was not a gift, it was a responsibility. Humanity understood immediately. Greater freedom meant greater consequence. The margin for error would grow thinner, not thicker. To accept was to accept accountability not just for themselves, but for the example they set. Earth accepted, not with ceremony, not with proclamation. They simply stepped forward, continuing relief missions, mediating disputes, refusing easy victories. The galaxy followed unevenly, imperfectly, but enough to matter. Some still resisted. Some always would. The universe did not erase them. It allowed their choices to play out, visible and instructive. Failure became teacher rather than contagion. The first-minute defense faded into history, retold now not as a triumph, but as a warning. A reminder of how close everything had come to ending the old way. Children learned it alongside stories of earlier extinctions, framed not as destiny, but as forks in the road. Above Earth, the stars held steady. They did not brighten, they did not dim, they waited, and humanity, aware at last that the universe could change in response to how it was treated, chose patience over pride, continuity over conquest, and restraint over the satisfaction of finality. Because surviving the first minute had never been the achievement, learning how to live after. It was, the anomaly began to withdraw, not retreating. Not vanishing, settling, its presence diffused slowly across spacetime, no longer concentrated near Sol, no longer watching from a single vantage. It became background, an echo of awareness woven into causality itself. The universe did not feel empty without it, it felt steadier. Humanity sensed the shift before instruments confirmed it. The subtle favoring of restraint faded into something quieter, balance. Outcomes were no longer guided, only allowed. The training wheels were coming off. This was the real test. Without an observer pressing gently on the scales, humanity would stand alone again, armed with everything it had learned, and nothing to stop it from forgetting except choice. The galaxy watched, not the anomaly this time. Everyone else, empires that had once prepared invasion fleets now measured Earth by a different metric. Not military output. Not territorial reach. But response time to suffering. Speed of de-escalation. Willingness to absorb loss without converting it into vengeance. Humanity remained dangerous. That truth never changed. Their fleets were still impossible to ambush. Their defenses still rewrote the rules of engagement. Anyone who tried again would not survive the first minute, but what defined them now was not what they could do, it was what they consistently refused to do, even when no one was watching. The first generation born after the attack reached adulthood. They grew up under skies that had once been targeted for annihilation and now felt unremarkable again. To them, restraint was not heroic. It was normal. Mercy was not exceptional. It was expected. That terrified the galaxy more than any superweapon ever had, because it meant humanity's behavior was no longer reactive, it was stable. At the outer edges of known space, explorers encountered ruins untouched by war, civilizations that had chosen isolation over escalation long before humanity ever looked up. When first contact occurred, it was careful, quiet, and free of urgency. No one rushed. No one postured. Time was no longer treated as an enemy. Earth's defense networks remained active, but they slept lightly, like guardians who trusted the morning. No alarms sounded. No countdowns ran. The memory of that first minute remained archived. Studied, respected, but never romanticized. It was not a victory, it was a warning that had worked. Far from Sol, where starlight thinned and navigation charts blurred into speculation, the last detectable ripple of the anomaly faded completely. In its wake, physics settled into something familiar again, unchanged on the surface, subtly altered underneath. The universe had not chosen humanity as rulers, it had chosen them as proof that overwhelming power did not require annihilation, proof that survival did not demand supremacy, proof that the most dangerous moment was not the first strike, but the choice that followed it. And so the stars turned on, indifferent but intact. Spinning patiently through a cosmos that had nearly burned itself out 1 minute at a time.